UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Hello viewers, welcome to the program Safelife. My name is Ishime Kathy and today we are at AHF Uganda Cares and I am with Diana. Please say hello to the viewers and kindly introduce yourself with all your titles.
My name is Diana Tibesigwa. I work with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation as the Regional Advocacy and Policy Manager. And so we are here today on this program to discuss the global ongoing conversation about the pandemic agreement, which originated from the recent COVID-19 crisis. And heads of state came together and agreed to put in place a framework, a global pandemic framework that will guide any future pandemic that will have an effect on the public health of our population.
Well, before we go into that discussion, can we first briefly talk about AHF?
Sure. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation is an international non-government organization. Our head offices are based in Los Angeles, and we have been in operation since 1987. We started as a palliative care organization doing advocacy to ensure that those who are affected by HIV have access to care and treatment, quality care and treatment. The organization grew and currently we are actually providing comprehensive HIV care treatment services to over 2 million patients globally in all our areas of operation. In Africa, we are now in 14 countries, including Uganda, providing the same HIV care and treatment services. And so this conversation of the pandemic agreement is very vital and important for AHF because we are concerned about the public health of the population, including the patients that we have as an organization, because they form part of the public health agenda. And so we come out here to ensure that the agreement that is being negotiated that is going to be negotiated in Geneva takes care of the equity health related issues that we shall be discussing on this program.
Well, straight away to that, I would like us to discuss those different equity problems that keep raising every now and then.
Sure. Like I have mentioned, you also have an experience during COVID-19. Other experiences, you may have not experienced them because you're not in those regions, but regions that experienced Ebola, cholera, they can tell you because those were life-threatening, experiences. People died. You remember in COVID, we had a number of people who died. People were saving their lives. We didn't have access to oxygen. Diagnostics were, a problem. Access to vaccines was a problem. And it is not because we had no capacity to access, but what was happening is that the rich countries actually were not at that time willing to send those vaccines to low and middle income countries because of one reason or the other. At that time, vaccines were very expensive and we could not afford as a country. So our governments had to go in to start negotiating to make sure that we have those vaccines, get to us. But by the time they broke through to have those vaccines, access to come to Africa, we had lost a number of lives. You get it? And we don't want that same scenario to happen again. So since then, like I mentioned, heads of departments came together and agreed that moving forward, we need to have a global framework that is going to guide pandemic preparedness and response moving forward. So the negotiations of the pandemic agreement started in 2021. So 2 years down the road, this conversation has been on and it's been done in phases. Representatives of different countries, the negotiators, have been participating. Even us here in Uganda, with Minister of Health being the lead, they've been participating in those negotiations. And so sometime early this year during the World Health Organization Assembly, they decided to discuss the agreement and come to conclusion. However, we were not able to achieve it because there were still pending issues that so many countries and individuals, brought up that could not enable us to have a conclusive pandemic agreement. And so these meetings have been happening. Like you see this, the one that is starting tomorrow is called INB 12, International Negotiating Body 12. It means the 12th meeting to discuss the pandemic agreement. So some of the critical issues that are still, disturbing us at the moment as an organization or as countries who are participating in this process, one of which is financing. That the financing mechanisms that is being proposed right now for the pandemic does not favor us in case any pandemic happen. That voluntary financing will not help us. You get it? We need to have non-voluntary financing to make sure that the rich countries are able to contribute to the financing mechanism for the pandemic preparedness, so that if in case any future pandemic happens, we are sure of the finances. But we don't also want to make our countries limp. We are also saying that even the low and middle income countries, they should also, in their budgets, be able to secure some resources that would contribute to this future pandemic. So we want to have a clear financing mechanism because we know where the money lies, and we want the high and rich countries to come up and make a contribution, a substantive commitment to say that they will be able to finance, future pandemics in case anything happens like that. Then secondly, we speak of technology transfer. One of the reasons as to why we still suffer those kind of issues, COVID, lack of access and all that, is because we as Africa, we don't have access to technology to do production by ourselves. That even right now, if we just decided to say we are putting up a plant, we don't even have human resource, that will be able to support like the production. It's not because we cannot mobilize, it is because of the conditions around it. That are we meeting the conditions, for example, to start up a pharmaceutical company in Uganda? Do we have the right to human resource? Do we have this? Others we don't have access because people who hold on to these things, the rich countries, right now are not willing to extend that technology to Africa. Are we together? So
a quick question. What are we doing as ourselves if those people are not reaching out to help? What is it that you're advising people to do to help themselves? Because if somebody else, you don't have to wait for somebody else to help you out. You have to come out on your own and help.
Exactly, and this is what I'm doing right now. That, at the moment, we have platforms to speak out. So what we are doing as an organization, for example, we are mobilizing different resources and stakeholders to speak out to some of these issues so that we have the rich countries and leaders who are part of these negotiations to reconsider and ensure that we have access. And also, I think these developed countries have always had interest in supporting helping the developing countries get out of poverty, get out of the disease burden that they have. So this is a time right now to demonstrate their commitment. Some of these commitments that we are speaking to, we are not just coming out with them. Like I told you, we have frameworks. We have, for example, the international health regulations that have just been amended. They still speak to all these. So it is not like an idea that AHF has come up with, that the diseases that we are discussing or issues that we are discussing, they are not Ugandan based, they're not African based. These are now global related issues. That's why we have those global frameworks. So the conversation of transferring technology is not because they don't want to transfer technology, but because of the greed that the pharmaceutical companies have, that they don't want to extend, because they know if they extend technology, we may take them out of business. The market will reduce. I want to tell you that the vaccine market in Africa, is about 25%, which means that products that are produced from those other countries, the biggest market is what? Is Africa. So right now, just know that we are tampering onto someone's profit, someone's market. So that's where we are losing balance. That if they provide technology, will they still be in business? If they provided human resource, will they still be in business? If they extended patents to allow low and middle income countries to start production, will they still be in business? So that is the conflict that we have right now. There is a lot of lobbying happening. There are a lot of threats that are happening, but we still believe that we can achieve something out of this conversation, because there is now demonstrated effort and capability that African countries have demonstrated. If we can count now in East Africa, we have over 40 local manufacturing companies coming up. Others are doing fill and refill. But we are still limited. Resources, technology, human resource, and where does it lie? There. So since this is a global related issue which concerns every one of us, then they should be willing to extend such things to Africa.
Well, how has the government been supportive throughout all this?
Of course, government takes lead when we start talking about access to health rights. Government takes lead in ensuring that its citizens have access to quality healthcare. Government has been participating in this process. If you were following, for example, that the INB11, our Minister of Health was in Geneva, and we tried to actually engage them. We're trying to engage the negotiators, people participated in the negotiation, who are participating in the negotiation process. And the issues that I'm raising right now were still their concerns. They still think financing is the biggest issue, and they want to see like high and rich countries commit resources to support low middle income countries in case there is any ongoing pandemic. Of course, patents and technology transfer is still an issue, on their side, that they would wish to start production, and widen up their production base as countries or East African countries. But if people who hold on to them are not willing to extend, we are still suffering. We will not be able to make it. And remember, there are a lot of regulations and laws around this whole entire production. We cannot just stand out and say, Uganda, we are starting production. We have laws that are governing that space. So we want those laws to be freed within this pandemic, treaty, to make sure that they loosen up to allow, so that we can freely do some of those things.
Okay, so what was today's main conversation about?
So today's main conversation, like I told you, AHF has organized a number of activations. So what we do always around those periods, we mobilize different stakeholders to raise up their voices so that they reach the negotiators. As much as we think we are here, we are using social media, we are using media platforms like yours, and we are pushing them out to make sure that these voices that are coming out of here are heard right away in Geneva. So today we wanted to listen to the survivors of hepatitis B, survivors of COVID. We had survivors of Mpox, the recent one that we have just had, and also just hearing out like experience from some of the community members, because AHF works with community members through an informal structure called Community Power Voices, which is meant to provide a platform to raise community voices on issues that are affecting them in areas of health and other related issues. So today we brought them on board, first of all to explain to them the status of the agreement and its implication on the community, because at the end of the day it gets back to who is the last mile beneficiary of this conversation. We people who have the diseases, communities that are suffering. So we were providing them a voice and a platform for them to speak out and share experience of how this whole entire agreement, if it is not providing like the equitable issues that we have been raising, it will still have an implication moving forward in any future pandemic, even the current one like Mpox, because we don't have access to Mpox vaccines yet. We are still in negotiations yet. We believe that there are some vaccines somewhere, or capacity to produce more vaccines to reach us, but right now it's not the case.
Okay, then what's your appeal to the general public and to the government? So
the general appeal, of course, to the first of all to our government is that as they go into this negotiation, starting this process, that we don't want them to sign an agreement that is going to have a negative implication on their population. So they need to rethink, about these equity issues that we are speaking to: financing, technology, patent rights being extended, and then issues of accountability, because in the previous there has not been like wide sector-wide like accountability, where you ask questions of why did this happen, why didn't this happen. So we are also advocating that the voice of a civil society should be part of the committees that are being established, so that in that way we are able to foster inclusive accountability around pandemic preparedness moving forward.
Well, just in case of anything, in case someone would like to find out more information, where can they be able to, maybe a contact or maybe a website or something where they could get more information from?
Of course, currently, because I'm not going to say that the pandemic agreement processes are sitting in AHF, but we are like any other concerned citizens. We have that information by ourselves, but also in Uganda, Ministry of Health, they have that the pandemic preparedness, I think, department, where that information can be found. So still Ministry of Health remains the focal point if you want to get information on how the country is progressing in their interactions and involvement into this pandemic agreement process. But if you need a voice in regards to other players like civil society organizations, AHF is just here to share with you on-time information on how this process is being handled, because we have our staff who are going to Geneva to be part of this conversation, and they are following closely, and we shall have timely information on how the process is moving forward. So we are available to provide you with progress on how this agreement process is happening.
Thank you so much. It was really nice having you on the show. Having heard from the advocacy manager, I would like us to have a word with the CEO at AHF. You're most welcome to the show. Please say hello to the viewers.
Hello viewers. Thank you to have us here at UBC.
Well, straight up, can we first briefly talk about AHF Uganda Cares?
AHF Uganda Cares. Two things. AHF is a global organization which supports Uganda Cares. So we are called AHF Uganda Cares. And AHF is one of the biggest HIV organization in US and across the world in terms of being a non-government organization providing HIV care, but also interested in global health. And that's the issue we are looking at today, the pandemic.
Well, can we briefly talk about the pandemic agreement being discussed globally?
The pandemic agreement is about how can developing countries benefit from being prepared for pandemics that come around that we have seen over the years. We had COVID-19 and now we have mpox and others. So it's an intergovernment organization getting together to look at how do we best respond to pandemics like, as I said, COVID.
Can we please talk about the different equity issues around us?
Developing countries are facing inequality, I would say, because you find that the production, the manufacturing of vaccine is entirely done in developed countries. And once that one is done, you find that the access is not equitable to developing countries like Africa, Uganda. You find that in the last pandemic, we had the last distribution of COVID-19 vaccine. So there are issues of inequality in terms of production, but also in terms of technology. The know-how of producing this vaccine is concentrated in the developed countries.
Talking about that, how has the government been supportive throughout this?
The government is part of the government organization that are now trying to negotiate equality in terms of access to vaccine, ensuring that countries like Uganda, developing countries, prepare very well for these pandemics when they come, so that they don't just find us unready. So government is part of the larger body, is part of WHO, so they are involved in negotiating to ensure that the agreements favor developing countries that are most cases marginalized in terms of access to the vaccines.
So what was today's main conversation about?
The main conversation today was to raise our voice to those that are right now involved in the negotiation, the pandemic discussion. They are in the 12th meeting. So there are issues that they need to hear, which are voicing out, and one of them is can they ensure that there is regional production of vaccine in developing countries in Africa. We currently don't have substantial organization that are producing these vaccines. So we are appealing and we are calling upon developing countries to ensure that they build the capacity of African countries in the region to be able to produce these vaccine. And then secondly, the technology is also, we don't have it. There hasn't been good transfer of the technology on how to produce this vaccine in developing countries. There is one that was set up in South Africa, but you find that it had to do just filling, bottling the vaccine and then exporting them. So we don't want that. We need real technology transfer, the means. So that means that they need to give us license in developing countries to ensure that we produce. Another thing is that the funding to ensure that production takes place is critical. You find that right now, still the developed countries that have the monies to fund. So we need to ensure that there is sustainable funding, short and long term, to ensure that, yes, once transfer of technology is given, then you have the money to produce these vaccines. Then, right now, it's about intergovernmental, organizations negotiating. Where are the civil society organizations? We know that civil society organizations are critical to accessing these vaccines to the communities and even finding out what are your needs, but they are out of the negotiation. So that's another call we have made today to ensure that civil society organizations participate in the negotiation.
Well, with all the meetings that have been held, what are some of the things that you look at and you've so far been successful about?
Increasingly, developing countries are committing funds to ensure that we can respond to these pandemics. We had the mpox in Kinshasa, in the Western countries, East Africa, Western countries. They have been able to make donation of the vaccine, but we need much more. We don't need mere donations. We need your financial commitment. So there is some progress. Donations are there, commitments are there, but they are not sufficient. I'll give an example. Right now in Africa, we need about 10 million doses to provide substantial vaccination program for mpox. But right now we are only able to get 2.6 million, offers a donation to do the vaccine for mpox, which means that they have done, but much more is needed.
Well, talking about that, we all know we're having this big challenge that we're always facing here and there, which is corruption. How are you managing? Because anything that has finances, you're like calling upon different people to finance. How are you managing? How are you making sure that if these finances are allocated, how are you ensuring that they are meant, that the finances that are allocated are doing exactly what it's meant to do, not going elsewhere?
Well, that's a big issue, and perhaps as civil society, we are doing our best to raise issues where there are inadequacies of medical supplies. We raise those issues to the attention of government. But we want to thank government that has come out with institution. The Inspector General of Government is one of those, but we depend so much on our parliamentarian because they are mandated to oversee the implementation of government programs. So we are hoping and we continue to urge the parliamentarian to follow up utilization of the resources. But we also have had the minister, for example, of permanent secretary, Minister of Health, moving around to see how services are delivered. So I think with civil society, the voice will continue to be raised to ensure that resources committed rightfully utilized.
Well, what's your appeal to the public, firstly, and then to the government? To the public, I would like you to also advise the different people around to make sure that they're in all possible ways cooperating with you, and we cannot just keep calling for help. We also have to help ourselves within this. How are you also able to call upon the public to participate in this?
Well, the public, I think what we need to do is to ensure that we prevent the diseases. So critical that the public takes on the sensitization, the educative messages about disease prevention, because once we don't have diseases, they will not need money for drugs. So to the public, very critical. Take charge of your health, ensure that preventive measures are adhered to, because once we do that, we'll not need the funds that perhaps we are looking for from our colleagues, the developed countries.
To the government?
To the government, we still have quite a lot to be addressed. As government, there was a commitment, the Abuja Declaration, where 15% of the national budget should go on health. That's an area that we are seeing government is not adhering to, is not fulfilling, and once that one happens, we continue to have gaps in vaccine, because it was of recent that we got a donation for mpox vaccine, that the country was able to access vaccine. If there is enough budget committed to health, you find that you will not wait for the donors to do the vaccination, and that's the reason perhaps we are even having more cases of mpox increasing the country, because we are waiting for donors to help us. So government, I think, keep the promise, ensuring that you keep the 15% budget allocation to health. But still, as a government, we ask you to join the other intergovernmental organizations that are now at the table negotiating for pandemic response. African countries, developing countries, we are at the receiving end, far end. So as government, I think your voice is very critical to ensure that there is equity in pandemic access, in pandemic response. African countries, developing countries should not come at the tail end of receiving these critical, health items. Government should be vocal, ensuring that I would say the grid that developing countries have, the less consideration of the underprivileged, less developing countries should be addressed, because we had instances where the pets, received the vaccination before it came to Africa. So it's very important that developing countries also look at what's the implication of ignoring this pandemic, because it's a security issue. It cuts across. One person will be infected in Africa, and eventually it will reach the developing countries.
Okay, well, if in case of any health concerns, or if somebody would like to get more information about the ongoing agreements, where would they find it? Any website or any pages where they could read this information from? Please share.
The best is the WHO website. It has the current responses, the meetings that have taken place, so it will be the best website to meet. Also, AHF global website has a lot of covering about the pandemic agreement.
It was really nice having you on the show. Having heard from the CEO, I think this comes to the end of the show. To the general public, please take care of yourselves and ensure that you prevent the diseases, because if you don't do it, there's nobody else that is going to do it. It's been Safe Life. My name is Ishime Kathy. Remember, living a safe life is your right and responsibility.